allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May I have a motion to approve the agenda for the business meeting of tonight, December 18th, 2023?
Sarah? Angela? Yep.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Move us to open forum. And the Greenville Central School District wishes to facilitate public access to meetings for the Board of Education and to provide an opportunity for public comment at these meetings. Accordingly, the open forum provides an opportunity for members of the public to share thoughts about topics on the agenda. An individual's comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. Additionally, comments may be emailed to the district clerk, Daphne Pearson, using the email pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. In order for an email to be read during the meeting, it must be received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting and state that the email is to be read out loud. Emails shall be limited to 600 words. Please note that this is not the time to register complaints that need to be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. Remarks that might be considered defamatory, obscene, profane, stigmatizing, or otherwise impermissible in public forums are prohibited and will be declared out of order. Board members actively listen during open forum but may not immediately respond to comments. Is there anyone that would like to say anything? Do we have any emails, Stephanie?
We do not.
Okay. Then I'm going to move us on to our presentations. So the first presentation is going to be given by Todd Hilgendorf, our Assistant Superintendent for Business, and Mike Bennett on the budget development process. Take it away.
All right, thank you, Tracy. It is nice to have the rest of the community and everyone on the board to join us in our updating the new year with the budget process. It feels like this is an ongoing, never-ending cycle that we're in. So this is kind of like our kickoff. So we're excited to have you guys be a part of this. So one of the things as we go into this presentation, we want to take a look at is everything we've done goes back to our district missions and goals. And again, I won't read all of this, but again, keep it in mind from a district leadership point of view, from a Board of Education point of view, and what we trickle down to our folks in the buildings and our supervisors is, what is the goal of building the budget? We've got to focus in around curriculum, culture, and community. So those three things were present as we continue to look at the construction of the board. So what we're going to do now is, it just doesn't appear. Our purpose tonight is to kind of walk you guys through the process that we will go through with kind of introducing the budget. We will then do our rollover budget. We then take a look at what are our priorities. These are things that we've been working with our leadership team, listening to the community for really since the adoption of last year's budget. Is taking a look at where we're at with things. We do recognize that this year we have the added hurdle of some of the funds that we have used in the past are going away with our ESSER funds. So things that we've been working on for three plus years to get to where we're at now. So we'll continue to go through that. We'll then end up having to modify the budget. There's a lot of wants. We went through this process last year. We kind of took in and shared with the Board of Education a lot of the requests that were being made. And then we obviously at that point have to start to make some modifications to the budget. Constantly looking at revenue. We know that we rely a lot on the state to provide us a certain amount, so we understand what we're looking at and what we'll ask of our voters. And then we get into how do we use our funds and fund balance and reserves. And all of that we'll get into when we finally get to the point of proposed budget. So From a development standpoint, these are kind of the decision points that we have to really process and take a look at. Obviously, our program, our academic program, and the staffing of that program becomes a high priority for us. And taking a look at, you know, schedules, course offerings, you know, enrollment, all those things that will go into, you know, how we're going to staff and what programs we're going to be running. Part of this is also taking a look at what the board is going to be comfortable with at setting the levy at, taking a good pulse of that come March and April, and then the use of fund balance and reserves, as I mentioned earlier, taking a look at how are we using those monies, how are they going, how are we supporting the different reserves that we have. All becomes part of what we have to decide on when we're talking about our budget. And then our budget timeline. As I mentioned at the start of this, it really seems like it's never ending. You know, this process of budgeting begins, you know, really before our leadership retreat in August. We start to really take a look at goals for the school year, things that we want to take a look at. You know, we get back to school and we're already hitting the ground running with our teacher leaders and developing, you know, some of the requests that they're going to have based on past year and what they're budgeted for this upcoming year to go into that next year. Our cabinet meetings, we meet on Tuesday. We really start to take a look at, you know, what do those requests look like? What are we thinking about in regards of potential budget ramifications? Then it leads us to tonight, where we start to take a look at our budget overview. We'll do the rollover budget in January, in which we just really take same program this year, put it into next year. What does that look like in dollars and cents, with really none of those other things being addressed? And then we really start to get into program components, where we'll have our principals come in, our supervisors, talk about you know, their wants and what they're asking for, and we'll move through that into eventually getting to our board adopting a budget that we'll put out to the voters, and then voting in May. So again, this is a long process. I know that the binders that you have will start to get filled up pretty quickly with a lot of materials. Some of those materials Todd will go over tonight. But again, nothing earth-shattering, not a lot of changes from year to year in regards to how we go about this process. But there are a few things that we will update. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Todd.
Thanks, Mike. Good evening, all. So I'm really going to build off of what Mike was sharing and just give some reference to some of the documents that the board has. So tonight, the purpose really is providing an overview of the process. That tonight is the kickoff. I like that phrase. Makes it sound exciting. Kickoff to our budget process. So the BOE should have a handbook. This is also on board docs for anybody to reference, that goes into more depth about the steps and the process that we use for budgeting, as well as some resources that go into the process. So if you're looking for it, the board, the handbook, it starts with, it says budget development on the very top. I'm just going to kind of walk through this from a very high level and some of the pieces that are in there. So looking at the first page, as a district, we continually review the current budget by looking at both our expenses to date as well as the revenues. We monitor those expenses to stay within the budget and to make sure that we're avoiding any waste. We also are constantly reviewing staffing levels, which are based on our enrollment and class size and the needs of our students throughout the year. And on the revenue side, we're constantly checking our revenue sources. Specifically, each month, the board has the revenue that's part of the treasurer's report that comes to you. And when appropriate in this process throughout the year, we also look for any opportunities for shared services. An example of that sometimes comes up during the school year is a transportation need somewhere for our student that's outside of district, that we might look for a shared service opportunity. As Mike referenced, at the January board meeting, we'll be presenting the rollover budget. The rollover budget is when we take the expenses for the current year, which is 23-24, and simply are rolling them over for 24-25, And in that rollover, we're only increasing the cost that we know or really can presume that will be increasing at specific rates. So some examples of that: salaries. We have contracts with the different labor groups within our district. Those contracts have in them built-in salaries. So we know what those salary cost increases will be from this year to next year. BOCES costs, we usually have a pretty good way to estimate that from one year to the next. Retirement costs, utilities, and insurance costs. So these are all areas that we know from one year to the next, those costs are going to increase, and we have an obligation to pay those increased rates. So those increases are included in that rollover budget. This really is the starting point. The rollover budget is the starting point for our budget talks, and then from there, we start talking about the preliminary budget. Gets into what Mike was sharing, those program and the budget priorities, where are those areas that we potentially want to see other increases or shifts. So that's really kind of just the overview of page 1, a little bit more detail with it. On pages 2 and 3, you'll see the timeline that we follow for estimating the expenditures as well as the revenues for the 24-25 school year. And these estimates will go into what we call the preliminary budget. Also on page 3, we have a list of considerations when developing the preliminary budget, and this includes some things I already mentioned, but retirement system rates, current labor contracts, and as well as health insurance. On the revenue side, at the end of March, we have to calculate the tax cap to see how much we are able to increase our tax levy within the cap. And we also hope that by the beginning of April, we will have our final state aid numbers. And between that time, January to April, we usually do have projections released from the state in January that we use as the first kind of round for that purpose. As Mike also mentioned, we are in the final year of some of our stimulus money, or of all of our stimulus money. We've worked over the past 3 years to plan for some of those expenses to continue into the future and what that would mean from a funding standpoint. So as we go into future presentations, you'll certainly be hearing about it as we'll share a summary of what we've used those funds for to date and what we are looking to recommend to continue into the future. In addition to just kind of the outline that I was just speaking to, the budget handbook that the board has also has a number of appendixes at the back. So just kind of walking through those. Appendix A is how New York State requires school districts to have a uniform way of doing accounting and financial transactions. So like budget codes, there's a very structured way that budget codes are created. That shows you how those are created. Appendix B is explaining the legal requirements for the budget process, so that includes timelines and notifications to the public. Appendix C is a glossary, so if you want to make yourself some flashcards and learn some terms about budgeting, that will be your place to look. Appendix D is about state aid. Appendix E is about fund balance and reserves. Appendix F is state aid factors. G is our budget summary for the past 5 years. That's where you can see some different charts and graphs that is pulling in budget data numbers from the past 5 years. And Appendix H, last but not least, is our tax levy and state aid summary for the past 5 years. So certainly not an in-depth review of every single piece of information that's in that handbook, just kind of walking you through the overview of what's in there. A great resource that, this was developed many years ago. We update each year and tweak it based on some feedback, but definitely a good resource for the board and for the public to learn more about the budget process. And if you have questions, you can reference that document or also reach out to us with those questions. The last, just 2 other things. Mike had this visual that's up on the screen. This is a different way of looking at our budget development process. So we have the detailed calendar that the board adopted back in October, I believe. This just kind of shows it as a timeline throughout the year. What are those major steps that are happening? And a lot of them do overlap. Right? This work is overlapping. Some months have 4, 5, 6 things all happening within that month. So just a different way of looking at it from a visual standpoint. And also important to point out across the top, the boxes that are in maroon, if you can tell that color on there, those are the specific board meetings where we will have budget presentations. So this month, December, is kind of highlighted in that darker gray color, and December 18th is in that first maroon box showing that we're doing the budget overview. And last but not least, truly, just a shout out to Sierra, so our communications specialist. She and I worked together earlier this fall, and did a review of our current budget page on our website, and took some resources from other places, and Sierra, being the great communication specialist that she is, did a kind of revamp and a facelift to our budget page of the website. So if you haven't checked it out, you can certainly do so. While all the information and the slide decks that we will use for budget presentations will be in board docs, so anybody can access them in board docs. We'll also be posting them on here, so this truly will become one-stop shop page for budget purposes. So that's just a screenshot up there of the new landing page for the budget side of the website. And that is it. We will be back in January for the rollover budget.
Todd, you have a question?
Yep.
I know we'll be getting into this in a lot more detail later, but I'm just curious to sneak a peek. The stimulus money that you said is going away, do you know
Yes.
offhand how much?
I don't have a breakdown in terms of like how much we're spending this year versus previous years. The total amount over the 3 years was about $3.6 million that we received as a district in stimulus funding. Some of those pots of money expired at the end, well actually not the end of it, was over the summer. It was by the end of August we had to have some of those pots of money spent down. Then there's others that go throughout this current school year. So in terms of how much is in this current year that we're still spending down, I can get that, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
I assume we'll be dealing with that at the appropriate point in the budget development process. So-
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
And there has been a fair amount of, thought, as Todd mentioned, back even, I think, before I started as superintendent, where there was some plans in place to take a look at a lot of, the spend down of that money and what's going to happen. And I will use this opportunity that right now to say that we begin our audit tomorrow on our ESSER funds at school districts across the state. All are at some point going to be audited, either a full in-person 2-day audit, a virtual audit, a book audit. We were working on this since the summer, and tomorrow is our kickoff with our half-day virtual. Todd, Aaron, Matt, Scott spent some time in this as well, and going back over what we put in our documentation to the state. So we will begin that process tomorrow.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for creating the timeline. I think I'm a visual person, and it's really nice to see it laid out differently. So I think while some people have, we've done this year over year, it's nice to be able to look at it with a fresh set of eyes and see things and then present them in a way. So thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So with that, I'm going to turn us over to our discussion then, and first topic for discussion.
Tracy, you have a question?
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
I'm going to start off by being positive. I'd like to give Todd kudos for this color-coded, I don't think I've seen that before, so I appreciate that. I also...
That's what happens when my teacher brain and Sierra's
But
communication specialist brain gets together.
So
That's the output of that.
I haven't seen it before, thank you, because I just looked through some budget documents. I don't think anybody here wants to go through a zero-sum budget process. So we do a rollover budget process, and we're going to look at all the documents over the next few months. But not that none of you don't understand this, but a rollover budget, you start from what we have, and we may or may not look at, we as a board may not look at in too much detail what we're assuming is going to be our starting point. Whereas a zero-sum budget, we start from zero and build on that. All I'm saying is I intend on asking a lot of questions during this process. Last year I voted no on the budget, and I didn't get there. I didn't start at that point. I got there because the budget wasn't where I wanted it to be, and maybe it won't get there this year either. But I plan on working with Todd to, like my father would say, squeeze a dime to get 3 nickels out of it. because I think that's the kind of year we're gonna be in. Just forewarn you.
Thank you, Dave. We appreciate that. But I think that one of the things you bring up is asking questions, and really that's important, because if financial oversight is one of the things that we're looking at, we need to ask the questions. And I do agree with you that everyone talked about kind of the fiscal cliff. And so with 2024, with the federal funds drying up and everything else, I think that we have been budgeting very conservatively, and the elements that were put in place, we knew that they were going to be going away, whereas not all schools handled it accordingly. Maybe they were more optimistic, whereas we assumed that it was finite, that it was 3 years, and so forth. So I think that from that perspective, having looked at it conservatively, we're in better shape than others. However, given the environment, given inflation and everything else, just talking to your neighbors and so forth, there is an appreciation for times are tough. So we do encourage everyone to ask questions.
Absolutely. And proof of my confidence in our budget department is, one matrix you can look at is the growth of our reserve funds. I've looked at other schools and they may be in trouble because they've spent some of their reserves, but ours are flourishing. And to me, that is an indicator or a matrix of a well-managed budget throughout the year, not just at the end. That may be the last good thing I say.
For now.
Yeah.
All right, so unless anyone else has any other questions or thoughts, then I am going to move us on to the Lewis Solar Partners, the LLC solar agreement, and Mike, if you could talk to us about that, please.
Yeah, so at our last meeting, if you remember, there was the contract and there were some questions that were brought up in regards to where we were at with those questions. So between our schedules, Todd and I were able to kind of gather some of those questions and get them both out to what is it? Next to get some of the questions. Chris, remember, had sat down with us in our virtual meeting and had gone through the contract before it had gotten to the Board of Education at our last meeting. So we've taken those questions and brought them back from the board to NextAmp and to Chris to kind of go through some of those answers. So I had given, I believe, the update on the questions to folks in a board update. Are there follow-up questions to some of that information?
Mike, I had asked, I thought of simple questions. I wanted to get the names. I'm sure that you folks have done your due diligence, but I wanted to know if we could be provided with names of school districts that are cooperating with these folks.
Yep.
And I will call them.
Yep.
So I would appreciate that contact number. Kind of like, I think it's my responsibility to do that.
Yeah.
When we were looking for a new superintendent, I actually talked to people about Mike Bennett. Someone talked to me the other day about Mike Bennett, and they accused us of stealing him from their district, so.
I like the way you work.
Yeah.
Todd, you want to?
You can send it to me, Todd, you know? Don't rip off a litany of school districts.
It's not a litany, but I can share. So one of the follow-up questions, after Mike had shared what he had, I then went back to Ron, who is our point person that works with NextAmp, and they were able to provide us at least 4 or 5 different districts.
Okay.
So I can share that out.
Are there any other questions related to this agreement? Then I would say, Dave, once you're comfortable with it, then the next step would be to then take an action item on this. Or that, okay.
Todd, is this gonna be affecting, is this gonna have a budgetary, implication if we approve it?
It could, yes. Yeah, the short answer is it could.
Okay.
In that, it's saving the district money.
Right.
That could then potentially be spent elsewhere.
Well, as far as timeline, you know, if she's looking for, a yay from me, then, you know, you wanna move it to January, we can do that.
That's kind of what I was thinking, so January, February, you know, at the latest, then that would allow us to then get it in place and then still make it for the next following budget cycle. So then why don't we say that January is our target? So if everyone then would go through, reread it, any additional comments or questions or anything else, then send it over to Mike. And then we'd be ready for an action item. Eric, go ahead.
And just for clarification, we're working with the 926 document.
This one, the original document?
In other words, the one attached to the
One
agenda.
attached to the current.
Yeah, that's that one.
Changes, yeah, I believe so. Is there a newer one? No.
I don't believe so, no.
Okay.
So as of right now, it's 9:26.
Okay, just
Okay.
making sure I'm reading the right one.
To the best of my knowledge, that is correct. All right, then let's move us on to the property tax exemption for volunteer firefighters. And Todd, I believe you had prepared a presentation, so I'm going to turn it over to you.
This is more of a discussion, not a
Sorry,
presentation. With
a
that,
discussion, sorry,
yes.
clarify that.
And again, I think this is something that we, the Board of Education will need to have, discussion around. We have been able to gather up through some efforts from Angela and from the different counties to kind of get an idea of where we're at. So Todd's put together some discussion points here. So Todd, you want to kind of walk through what you've got?
So I know Mr. Bennett shared with the board a slide deck that was pulled. Angela, thank you for the connection to Bethlehem because they had worked on this. And then also my counterpart, Kara Durham, Jeff, has helped assist with providing information. But pulling from those places as well as the state law, put together a slide deck for the board to kind of review some of the main highlights. And the other piece for us in Greenville is we have an added complexity of we live in 2 counties, right? Or the district is part of 2 different counties. There are 3 different counties. Thank you, Daphne. Technically, there's that little piece of scaring. Greene County, their Office for Taxation is great about coordinating among all those small towns so that the information that they provide us is nice and organized. So some of the information in that slide deck that was shared is also coming from me. So really this is a discussion, I think, for the board to talk through what you are thinking or what you are hearing from the community about what you would like to move forward with. The important piece would really have to be somewhat of a commitment in January so that either on the January board meeting or at the very latest the February board meeting would be a resolution, because by March 1st is the deadline for basically publicizing that. So it would have to be, again, at the very latest that February board meeting. Really what this comes down to is it's a tax exemption for current firefighters and ambulance workers. The board has the ability to decide within the community is the tax exemption can be up to 10%. That 10% comes off of the assessed value. So if a firefighter who meets the requirements of being a volunteer firefighter within the school district, so let's say Greenville is a nice clean example. This person lives in Greenville, is a volunteer firefighter for the Greenville Fire Company, meets the requirements for being that volunteer. If they had a $100,000 home, nice easy numbers, they get a 10% off that assessed value or up to 10%. So it'd be down to $90,000 of the assessed value, which then obviously impacts the taxes that they pay. Those taxes get redistributed amongst everybody else within the Greenville School District tax base. So it's not an exemption that comes from the state, it is a local exemption, meaning it gets redistributed to the other taxpayers. So part one is the tax exemption can be up to 10%. The other piece that the board has flexibility with is the years of volunteer service. There's a minimum of 2 years, but it could be up to 5 years. So you could say as a board, anybody with at least 2 years would be eligible for this, or you could say, nope, we want to put it at the higher threshold all the way up to 5 years. And that's really kind of the baseline of information, but I think it's important for the board to have discussion about what you are thinking, and if there's other information you need to gather or try to put together, I'm certainly welcome to do so.
So Todd, currently, what exemptions do we have? We have disability, we have veterans, we have seniors. So currently we're offering 3, is my understanding. Okay.
Todd, one question about location of or how this is applied for firehouse versus fire person. Because I'm sure we have some firehouses that border 2 different districts.
School districts?
No, yes, school districts. So someone like Earlton, some of those firefighters may live in Coxsackie School District or Carroll School District, and some of them live in Greenville. So are we applying this discount to the person that lives in our district? I'm assuming, right? That's the only, never mind, that was a stupid question.
No, you talked for a minute.
Yeah, I talked myself into an answer.
But Dave, it made me think of another point. There is an exemption at the county level, the town level, and the school district level. So there could be somebody currently within Greenville School District, we don't have the exemption, but the county does. So there could be smaller amounts that somebody could already get from the county level, but the maximum exemption, a firefighter is going to benefit from the maximum exemption when all those 3 pieces approve the exemption.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is opt-in also, so if they're getting the tax credit and this wouldn't benefit them, they don't have to do it. They have to choose one or the other, right? There's like I think it's a $200 tax credit when they file their taxes that they all get, but they can't get that and this exemption. They have to choose one or the other, right?
So a couple pieces there. One, yes, it's an opt-in.
Okay.
It doesn't just automatically happen. If this was approved and somebody was eligible within the district, they actually have to fill out paperwork and it goes to the assessor's office, is my understanding. The other piece that you're mentioning is firefighters already have a New York State income tax credit that they can, if they're eligible for it, they can apply for. They can't take that and this. So individual would have to decide which one is the greater benefit for them and choose. Currently, and again, this is just facts, I'm not advocating one way or the other. If a firefighter only gets the exemption from the county level, it's most likely that income tax is going to be the better route for them to choose. If all 3 levels, county, town, and district, were to approve the exemption, it might tip the other way, and then this is the better option over the income tax. But it's also, I think, very dependent on the other factors of that individual, the value of their home, those different pieces.
And I think that also makes it harder for us to estimate how this is going to impact other people because we don't know who's going to take it. We don't know, if a firehouse has 30 members, how many have been there for 2 or 5 years or more. And I think there's also, if you're a member for 20 years, you get this exemption for a lifetime, right? They could, even if they're not active. I'm just throwing out facts that I think I read properly.
My understanding was that we set that parameter for the school district exemption. So if we say, after they've been an active member for this long, they no longer have to apply for our exemption anymore, but that's not automatic.
Even the lifetime?
Yeah, I think
Correct. We set from what I understood, from my conversations and from my research. So we can say, after they've been an active member for 10 years, we no longer require them to apply annually. It'll just be automatic for life. So not lifetime status in the fire department. That's, you know, we're saying after this point, and it all depends on how we word it when we put it together. The other thing I want to point out is that this is dependent on them being active within their fire department. An active standing firefighter, there's a lot of rules around that from each fire company. So there's drills, there's calls, there's meetings, there's certifications, and that's why they have to reapply every year, and the fire department has to verify that they are active in good standing. So that takes our numbers down even more.
But I think that the individual fire company has their own rules. I don't know if it's governed by another body of what an active firefighter is, because they don't want to discourage membership for the people that maybe come to one fire per year as opposed to people that go to all of them. So it's just, there's a lot of moving parts.
But that's not, all I'm saying is for our standards, like when we say active firefighter, fire departments may have different rules around it, but they are staying on top of that. So it's not like somebody's gonna slip through the cracks on our end. I mean, we're talking about small numbers.
Has the county or town implemented this? Let's find the right slide. So within Greene County, the county did adopt it. 10 of 14 towns adopted, 5 of 10 school districts, 3 of 5 villages, 6 of 26 fire districts. I feel like I should say partridge in pear tree. So it's some towns, some villages, but the county, yes, to answer your initial question, the county did adopt it.
Todd, what does it mean by 6 out of 26 fire districts adopted? Like, what does the fire district have to do to adopt? I'm really confused.
Good question. I'd have to verify. I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that.
So process, Tracy, wise, I think we need to have a discussion that centers around whether or not we agree with this philosophically. And then set the percentages and the service requirement. And so that Todd can give us more of a hard number to see how it's going to affect our budget. And then have the time to play with the percentages if it's going to be exceeding what we can afford.
Well, given that Todd had mentioned January as a possible time frame for needing a resolution, then tonight might be the discussion of philosophically where do members stand on this. So do people want to start and go around? Don't all jump at once.
I'm absolutely for it. Put it out there first.
As I am.
No, I'm for it. I haven't been quiet about that.
Not as decided as everyone else. I still have some concern about the financial impact would be. And, I mean, although in principle I support providing a benefit for the first responders, especially since I think most of them are volunteer, concerned about what the potential impact would be. And also concerned with just, Christine, thank you for clarifying how many exemptions we already have. I just do have concern about periodically adding on another exemption where just the impact of the ratepayers, taxpayers, kind of over time gets bigger and bigger from additional exemptions. I'm not saying I'm for or against it, I'm just still listening to what you're saying.
So where I am with it, I guess from my philosophical perspective, I'm going to say something that sounds negative. I'm against it because the state is supposed to be doing this, and what we've done is we're just moving money from my right pocket to my left pocket type behavior. And I don't know if that's the right way for the state to be telling us how we pay for our mandates. But as far as the firefighters, I'm in support of them, and I would vote
I'm not sure if what I have to say matters here, but I'm with everyone else too. I'm for this.
Thank you. I think that where I'm at, I agree what the state has done is, I have issues with it and I'm not in agreement, but I think that I don't see any differentiation with some of the other exemptions that we have, so I cannot make a distinction. So if we have exemptions already in place, and this is another exemption that I would have to vote yes, because I cannot differentiate. So that's kind of a long-winded roundabout way. So then it sounds like philosophically we have at least enough members that would proceed. Now the question is understanding what the impact would be. And this is where it gets dicey in the sense of, do we have any information from Albany County? No. So any decision this year means that we have X percentage that we don't know what the impact is. We are flying completely blind. Sorry, Todd, to put you on the spot, but I just want to lay it out.
There's a lot of variables that go into it. So even like Angela mentioned, this is an opt-in. So even would everybody that was eligible opt in to do it? We don't know. Right? So it's not a clean, like, here's the number of people, this is the value of their home, this is what it's going to be. To truly figure it out, we would have to know who all the volunteer firefighters are that live within our district and serve on a volunteer fire company that's within our school district. What's the value of their home? Are they going to take this exemption? And for them to make that decision, it might depend on, do they live in a town that also has accepted it or not? Because it might still be more beneficial for them to do the income piece. So in terms of like a hard number, here it is, I don't think there's a way to do it that is going to help inform. One of the things that Greene County did, there's a lot of ifs that went into their formula. Let's pull it up so I can read it actually.
And as Todd's pulling that up, is that the same document that we shared a couple of weeks
Yes.
back?
Yep.
On board docs, kind of puts that number, dollar total amount based on a certain amount of what the property is appraised for. And it varied, again, quite a bit. But we weren't talking huge numbers. The other thing that the board has to decide on is what is the years of service? Because that will eliminate potentially even more numbers if we're talking folks who are active members for the last 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. That's something the board does have some control over as well. So to get hard numbers, to get exact, we can't even do that at tax time with levies. It's going to be basically a guesstimate based on the town you're living in and those types of things. So similar situation here.
I mean, in doing the modeling, we could do worst case scenario, just assume that everyone is going to take it, take an average of, when we did previous exemptions, I believe we used 150,000 as kind of the average house assessment. And again, that's not the retail value, that's the house assessment. So obviously it's lower than the market value. For that, and we just start running numbers based on those assumptions. It's a point, it's a stake in the ground. And the way I would look at it is worst case scenario, it could be up to this if everyone takes it, this is the assessed value and so forth. Then we can see the sensitivity. If we change and go from 150,000 up to 200,000 to 250,000, and we can see how much of a range we're getting in that, then we can see the sensitivity for it. Sorry, I'm geeking out on numbers, but it's a starting point, you know, just to kind of say, here's what I think it might be.
Yes. So I pulled this up behind you, so sorry. As you're saying it, I pulled up
Okay,
the
I
screen
can't
behind
see
you.
anything.
That's okay. This was in the slide deck that Mike had shared with the board. So this again, Greene County Real Property Tax Service out of Greene County is great about trying to pull together information for us as districts. So this came from them, kind of doing what you were just mentioning, Tracy. So this is nothing about Greenville as a school district, so just keep that in mind, but at least it's a starting point. This is taking all Greene County, so all the towns in Greene County, and the fire companies in Greene County. Their estimate was there was 1,254 members. From there, they went through using an average full market value of Greene County home of $253,000. They identify that the savings would be a total of $492, and it's broken down how that was arrived at: county, town, and the school. Again, there's those three pieces. And then the third bullet point: all the firefighters became eligible. This would be if all firefighters in the county, so it doesn't this is not Greenville School District, but it's the county, it would be a $31 million shift of market value from them to the other taxpayers. And then the last bullet point, which might be the most important, this goes along with what you were saying, Tracy, the tax shift would be $6.77 for each $100,000 of full market value. So if I owned a $100,000 home in Greenville, I would be picking up an additional $6.77 from the shift from the exemption to the others. Again, none of this is exact to a township in Greenville, but at least it's a starting place using averages within Greene County.
So this is this like it's not quite a worst case scenario because of geography and other factors, but it's over inclusive. Is that
Yes,
fair?
I would agree with that, yes.
That's looking at the entire firefighter role in Greene County. That doesn't have anything to do with if we set it at 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, etc. That's assuming they've all opted into it. The other thing is, correct me if I think, so say a husband and wife are both firefighters for the town, only one of them, they can't claim the exemption twice.
I was told that they can both claim it.
One can claim the credit on the income taxes, the other could claim the property, the exemption on the school
Let's just get definite
taxes.
clarification on that, because I was told something totally different from the Bethlehem contact.
Would it vary based on if they file separately or file jointly? So that might be a clarification.
Todd, you said that under these assumptions, the shift would be per taxpayer total an additional cost of a little over $17.
So the 17 is the makeup of, yes, county, town, and school. If all three, if a person living in a town, Greene County already accepted it, towns, it's different across the county. If somebody was living in a town where the county, the town, and the school all approved it, yes, the maximum was 1712. Again, a lot of ifs that went into that, but rough estimates is a starting place. Now, some of that is already happening, right? Because the county approved it, so that shift already previously happened.
Do we have any sense of, for Albany County, would it be similar?
I don't. It would need more research. Albany County, no. Greene County provides a lot of good information, as I've said.
For Albany County, do all the towns have volunteer fire departments? Or in our area? Kelly's shaking, saying yes, I believe so.
As far as I know, they are all volunteer.
Okay. So, I don't know, worst case scenario, it doubled 35? I don't know. I'll take 35, going once. But how do we even try to quantify it? I mean, does Albany County have any information? And can we even separate out? I don't think we're allowed to just say one county and not the other. It's an all or none.
Todd actually sent the information when asked Albany County if they could come up with something. They actually asked Todd, could you please send us what Greene County did? So
how quickly can they work on that?
Well, it seems that realistically, we're not going to have, for various reasons, we're not going to actually have a solid estimate of what the impact will be. We know one potential worst case scenario under certain assumptions for Greene County is kind of like a partial impact. But I just don't see how we can get to like an actual firm estimate. I'm curious though, sorry if this is a little tangential, but I'm curious. I understand the difficulty with projecting what the impact might be, but we have three exemptions in place. Do you know what the current impact of those exemptions is?
I don't. I can get it, but I don't know that.
If it's easy to calculate, I'm curious. We spent, even for the prior exemptions, I know we spent a fair amount of time having a similar conversation. I'd be curious to know if, given all that uncertainty back then, now when we actually come to see what the impact is, it actually turns out to be relatively small. Or maybe it's more significant than we thought. So I would think it's somewhat easier, I hope, to figure out what the current exemption impact is, but if it actually isn't, if it's an exercise like forecasting it, then don't worry about it. I don't think it's going to be useful. Thanks.
Todd, isn't that information in the budget workbook from last year? There's an exemption impact report that shows what each district or what each town has and how much
Okay.
should be on there.
Thank you, Daphne.
No. I'll find it.
Eric, go ahead.
All right, I'm gonna come at this from a different direction. So, everybody get ready to throw things. Todd, between now and the end of February, if you spent your entire time looking at this, do you think you can come up with an answer?
What do you want to throw, Todd?
No Christmas.
There's no
Come
way
up
to-
with an answer to what? What was the exact question?
No, that's it. Can you come up with an answer?
An answer to what the impact would be, I don't think I could.
Okay.
Because what it would actually require, to be very honest, would require a lot of conversation with each fire company around who are your current, give me your current roles, like who is on your rolls of volunteers, give me that list. Okay, from that list, where does each of these volunteer members live? Okay, of those who are living in which townships, list them out by township, who's within the school district. Okay, call each of those members. Hey, if you had an exemption, would you be willing, or are you interested in this exemption? Okay, so what's the value of your current home? Put that,
Right. So what I'm hearing you
You're
say is
asking,
there's
that's what it would
absolutely no
take.
way to come up with that number within a reasonable period of time.
it would be challenging.
Which brings us to our next comment. For us, we're not going to know that answer. No matter what Todd does, we're never going to get that answer by February 20th or 20th. So if we have to make the decision, it's going to be by the seat of our pants as to whether or not we want to do this exemption. It's a feel versus a data-driven thing. So how do you feel about it? And I've already said, I feel our firefighters, they're important people and so forth. I don't like the way it's been presented to us from the state, that they're making one person in the town pay for it versus the state giving us the money. But I think that at this time, knowing the numbers that we've seen before, that it's a small impact on everybody else. 100 people are giving to one person, we'll call it, for town numbers, and we have to decide, I guess, the percentage now, and how long they have to participate. Because we're never going to know the number of what the impact is. My thoughts.
So does that change, however, what anyone had just said then? Because it sounds like we'd be required to make a decision without necessarily having, although I would like to see the exemption report from last year. And is there a way to break out Albany and Greene County, just like on a percentage basis, without spinning your wheels or anything? Like, my question is, what percent comes from Albany County and what percent comes from Greene County? I don't have a sense of that at all.
Can I give you, in my research, So I know some people in the Westerlo Fire Department. They live in Albany County, and they live in the Greenville School District. And from what they were able to do, going through the list in their head, in the Westerlo Fire Department, which is a big chunk of our Albany County, I would think, although Rensselaerville and stuff, but you're talking 2 or 3 people. Most of the Westerlo Fire Department wouldn't qualify. That's just one, but if you talk about Albany County, you're talking about Rensselaerville, Medusa, Westerlo, and you're talking maybe you could count them on 2 hands at least. So the Albany County impact, I think focusing on the Greene County one is much bigger, if that helps at all.
I agree with that, 100%. Most of our volunteers are Greene County based.
Because you have to consider they own land or own their home and live in the Greenville School District, regardless of the county, and meet the criteria that we set. So again, can't really get the answer easily, but to focus on the Albany County impact versus the Greene County impact, I think it's focus on the Greene one.
No, it does help me. Anyone else?
Tracy, if you and Jay recall, when we talked about the veterans exemption, we didn't know a hard number either. Although I think this is a little bit larger as far as, more difficult actually, because the number of veterans that live in our district was easier to obtain than contacting all those different firehouses. But to move this forward, and I'm going to make a motion that we amend the agenda to include an action item that causes us to vote on our philosophical, instead of just putting a straw vote out there, which we just did. We'll have an action item that causes us to decide whether or not we're going to move forward with this.
What would be the benefit of having it now versus in January? Help me understand the benefit of it.
Well, I listening to all the comments and Todd's time frame for calculation, if we get parts of this put away for say, and I'm not asking that we nail down a service year number or a percentage that we're going to offer or exempt them from, but just whether or not, because then we can move those 2 items to next year, or well, yeah, it will be next year, January. And then he might be able to, well, Todd needs to know, the business department needs to know we're going to do this, or we're not going to do this. So then he has to budget some time toward that activity. Then he can start the process of getting closer, not like Eric says, we're never going to have a hard number, but if we say, Todd, we're going to do this, find out the number of firefighters we're talking about, find out the number of firefighters that are 3-4 years, and then, do some fictitious percentage, I'm not going to throw a number out there, based on your $100,000 house. Help a lot of calculations, I understand that. But I don't think we're really talking about a lot of money here.
I would agree with that. I'm not sure that we need a vote because we already have 4 individuals that would support it, so that would warrant moving it forward to January.
That was not a formal vote.
No, I know it's not a formal vote, but I don't think we need to have a formal vote to then have the additional information.
Oh, no.
And can then put it on potentially as an action item for January. I don't know. Am I missing something?
That's the way you want to go about it.
I'm flexible.
Well, I think I agree. I don't think we need a vote now to have it as an action item for January. And, I appreciate the effort Dave's trying to maybe narrow the scope of what Todd might do to get better estimates, but honestly, I don't think it's worthwhile because from everything I've heard, it seems like it's just not possible for us to get the information we really need to make reasonable assumptions, to have some good idea of what it might cost. We'll get a number from whatever he might be able to find out, but we'll have no idea how reliable that is or accurate. So I don't know if it's worth having him potentially spend a lot of time to go through that exercise, unless there's some fairly straightforward additional thing he can do to try to get us more reliable numbers. But from what I've heard, there's not. I think we've heard enough to at least have some idea of what the potential magnitude might be, and if that matters to your decision, support it or not, great. And if it doesn't matter, then great.
My question is, at what point do we as a body decide the two other factors, the two parameters that we do have at our disposal? I guess we could just say, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to max it out. Or some other.
Well, we could have the discussion right now, how do people feel on the number, the two elements we need, so the number of years and then the percentage. So I'll start with this one. I'm thinking 3 years. I'm somewhere kind of in the middle. I don't think that we need to go to 5 years because of people's situation changes, but at the same time, there may be individual, I don't know, 3 sounds like a better number. I will say it that way. How do other people feel?
I was going to recommend 3 also, so I agree with that.
And that's 3 years of active service.
I think that's what we're talking. Active service that's part of the definition. It's anywhere between 2 and 5 that's the range that we have to work with. Dave, what do you think?
Well, right now, I wish there was a chief of the fire department right here in front of us that we could ask what their opinion was, what their input would be. That number sounds fine to me as a starting point. But I have no idea. I mean, maybe there is requirements that's inside the firehouse that number doesn't work.
Dave, just so you know, I did reach out to multiple fire companies in the district and asked them to come speak to us or email us and tell us their thoughts, and nobody's here to tell us their thoughts, unfortunately.
Well, I think that some of the other school districts, like in reaching out to Bethlehem, when they passed it, and some of the other school districts that did it, were they able to reach out, do you know, Todd, to either their volunteer firefighters or anything?
I can certainly reach out to them. I can also, our neighbors that have this, Catskill, Cooksaki, Hunter, and Wyndham have approved the exemption. I can certainly reach out to my counterparts in those districts and find out what was the years of service and what was the percentage, just to get an idea of our surrounding neighbors, if that would be helpful.
Todd, another piece that would be helpful is if they gave the lifetime exemption when they reach a certain point.
I can just get what were the components of the exemption that they had, the language.
Or not so much below would be another one.
Oh, true. Yep.
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
That would be extremely helpful.
Okay.
I didn't hear that, Kelly. What was that last part?
BKW just also implemented this, so it would be good to get their information because they're Albany County.
Okay.
And since we don't have any other really good data, could you give me a standard deviation with the mean for that data set?
What do you want to throw?
No,
Well,
see,
it's a sample
I speak
set
that
under
language, so sure,
150,
sure,
so-
Eric, that'll be fun. I'd love to.
Just tell them it's a sample set that's under 150, so it may not be relevant, so.
That's true, it's not a good population.
What about the percentage? where do people stand on percentage?
Again, that just, Kelly's comment about Bird Knox Westerlo means that if we have some firefighters that are working in the Westerlo Firehouse but are living in our district, for comparison purposes, and everybody compares everything in this country, I think we want to get that information to see that we're not out of line with what other neighboring districts are offering.
Agree. That's a good point, Dave.
And is the sliding scale at all an option? So X percentage at X year, X, Y percentage at Z, okay, Kelly's looking at me, sorry, I'm nerding out again.
I don't remember what the options are. When you talk about what percentage, what range are we looking at?
Up to 10%. So, again, it would be helpful to know what the other districts are doing and so forth, kind of to your point, Dave, just making sure that it's within that range.
Does this need to be decided tonight, or can we like get more information and then make a decision by January, or how does this have to happen?
No, what we're trying to do is have all the questions, so we have the information, so we're then in a position that we can vote to the best of our ability. We won't have 100% of the information. So I think that during this discussion, we're just trying to throw out, Todd, catch, all of the questions that we would like him to answer to help us decide.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this has to go to a public hearing too, and I have to do 30 days notice.
All right, so let's back up, Daphne. Can you back us up? So,
It has to go, once you decide what you're going to approve, or what
Right.
you'd like to approve, that has to go to a public hearing. So I'd have to do that first in the meeting. I have to give 30 days notice before that happens in a meeting, so we may have to have a meeting in January if we want to try to get this. It's not, it's more than 30 days before the January meeting.
I mean, a public hearing before we vote on whatever the proposal.
It would have to be, prior to it, so we would do like after open forum, we could have a public hearing
But-
and then vote on it.
But if the hearing happened, let's say, January 8th, we could formally vote on the
I
resolution.
can't do it January 8th because I don't have enough notice to give to the public that there's going to be a hearing in 30 days
Okay.
because of the date being the
Because
18th
it's
right now.
And Todd, you said that the final time for us to pass it will be February, is that right?
Yes, there's a March 1 deadline of submitting information to the state.
Okay. So if at our January meeting, we agree to adopt something with certain parameters, could that then be set for a public hearing in February at our business meeting to be followed by a vote, following the public hearing?
I think so. It'll just be really tight to put it back on the assessors to be able to get all of the stuff from their landowners.
But it could be done.
Yeah.
All right, so just to recap then, time-wise, if we wanted to have a vote on February 26th, then we would have to have the public hearing.
Is that our first? I think it's February.
I don't
There's one
know,
before.
pulling these
There's one
dates,
before
so.
that.
No, those,
Get back in.
I think so, those are the budget ones.
Those are the
We
budget.
have them.
We do.
Okay, but if we have the budget ones, then we could use one of those meetings to then use it as an action item. So it's like we have a couple of meetings, it's not just one per month that we have to work with.
And we can always call a special meeting, that's not a big issue too.
Okay?
I think that first meeting, I'm waiting for my computer to come back
Fe-
on.
February 12th.
Thank you. So we could do it then.
So we could do February 12th for the action item of the public hearing. When is the public hearing?
Both.
Well,
Okay,
There just has to be 30 days notice. So if the January board meeting is the 8th, more conversation, decisions happens there. You could then put out a 30-day notice, right, Daphne?
I could put it out whenever.
The day after, so that it meets the deadline to have the hearing on the 12th and then an action item on the 12th of February.
okay. And one question is, with public notice, does that do we have to have the specifics of what the resolution is?
I would,
Okay,
so that way they know what they're looking at
okay.
or hearing.
All right, so by then, for the public notice, then we would have to have the percentage and the years of service and what we want to do with the lifetime, those three elements.
Yes.
All right, is there any other information that board members feel that they need to have in order to make a decision or to move things forward? All right.
Do we get to pick the color?
Yes, if you would like. But if anyone has any questions, then please, send them to Mike, send them to Todd, so that we can be working on it, especially given the holidays and everything else. Okay. Anything else on the subject, or I'm going to move us on? All right, thank you. So let's. This is an easy one. We have a second reading, the updated policy 7140, which involves alcohol and drug testing of bus drivers. So last month we had the first reading. Any discussion on this item?
I think when I did the second reading, all the typos and word changes were in there this time too. We have all our days and A if paths correct.
It's still the red line that we're reading, and there are still others that need to be,
It's all
no, they've been
correct.
corrected. Okay. Hmm. Any discussion or any questions related to this? So then, the process then for after the second reading becomes an action item. Okay. And actually, just kind of as an aside, the policy committee had their meeting, and for next month we will have several updated policies that will be coming in front of the board for that. So let's see, board priorities. Eric, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you. All right, so since our last meeting, I did go back and look at it, and I emailed you all my worksheet, and it's just for your reference. After grouping similar answers that we had at the time and so forth, I think that it came, as I see it, and if there's something that needs to be changed, that's okay, you can bring it up. But I think the list for the goal sheet has come down to, and this is not in any particular order, the three things are gifted and talented, I'll call it whole student / challenge, so that there were three people who had discussed the opportunities for students and gifted and talented and so forth. So I think onto our goal sheet for accountability, we should have in the list gifted and talented. The second one being learning gap, improved reading. There were two items that were in there that were talking about student reading and learning gap. And then the third item was curriculum and mapping. So there was also a contender in budget for electric buses, and I think those items I don't want to put in the goals because we're going to do budget. I mean, that's just part of it. So I think those are the three that popped out of the list. So if you want to put that into our goals sheet, unless someone wants to think differently, comment differently.
Any thoughts or any discussion on those items? Okay, all right, thank you, Eric. And now I'd like to turn over to Mike and a discussion about football.
Yeah, so just a quick update, as we continue to look towards, there have been some conversation around the possibility of adding football or merging with Kutsaki Athens. So Denise has gone through and is working with the athletic director at Kutsaki Athens to start to come up with some pricing in regards to some of the things that they have to worry about, everything from uniforms, travel, which includes 4 to 5 away games a season, coaching stipends over the course of the program, which is 5 paid positions, equipment supplies, budget, reconditioning of supplies, one of the things that is be it a contact sport, shoulder pads, helmets, those types of things have to be reconditioned every year. They're saying a rough estimate to outfit a player just for practice stuff is anywhere between $1,000 to $1,200 per player. And then officials for 4 to 5 games usually runs between $2,700 and $3,400. Their trainer, they do use a trainer from contract with Lead Physical Therapy to provide some of those things. So there will be an impact on the budget, obviously, a cost to exploring this further. We would have to let Section 2 know by February if this was something that the board felt strongly that we wanted to do, is commit some resources towards merging with Coxsackie Athens football.
Quick question. So it has to do with the coaches now. Obviously, I don't think in our history here we've had a football team, and so I'm just curious. We'd have to recruit coaches, correct? And would that require training them? And would that, would that cost something for training them?
Thank you, Harrison. I think the plan would be, since Coxsackie Athens currently has a program that's up and running, we would most likely use the coaches that they've got in their program now, but would share some of the costs.
Okay, I figured as much, but I just figured I'd ask. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Mike, when you say it's $1,200 per player to outfit them, is that just for their equipment, uniform? That doesn't count transportation for practices, anything like that? That's just per player uniform?
Correct. That is just information coming from Coxsackie in regards to putting on the helmet and shoulder pads and a practice jersey. There would be added responsibilities on our behalf to get our students down there. The logistics with transportation and busing on a regular run it would be incumbent on us to make sure that the kids got down to the practice field. So yes, that would be an additional cost on top of uniforms, officials, those types of things.
Do you know what kind of impact it would be on the insurance that we carry for our athletes?
I don't know the impact on additional rider or additional cost to our insurance. I will reach out to Utica National and see if this some way impacts our current insurance.
And Mike, I just wanted to say, does anybody even know if Coxsackie Athens wants to merge with us? I know people keep saying it, but has anyone even heard that?
There has been some interest. I think Coxsackie Athens is willing to allow our kids to come down and be a part of the program. I don't know what their current status is at the 3 levels, modified JV and varsity, to see how many kids they've got. But I do know across the region, schools have struggled to support, especially small schools, struggle to support with numbers a full team. So I don't know what their current situation is in regards to needing more players or wanting more players, but they are certainly interested in listening to us and having this discussion with us.
Okay, and then I had asked previously if there was the possibility for a waiver player, and I was just wondering if you could explain that.
Yes, so waivers are allowed by Section 2 by the state when there's it's not a team sport. Let's take swimming or golfing, really competing, maybe as part of a group, but you're really going on your own times or your own scores. They don't allow waivers for team sports, football, basketball, baseball, those types of things, softball. So that's where the waiver can come into play.
So to be clear, it's not a possibility for them to just have a team and us to send one waiver kit.
Correct.
Because it's a team sport.
Correct.
You said it was approximately $1,200 for uniform equipment. You said in the practice jersey. Is that the like all-in equipment price, or was there some additional for equipment for games?
Yeah, so like game uniforms and things are extra, but that we would have to be able to supply our students. The $1,000 to $1,200 estimate that we were given is pads, helmet, and practice gear. It's not the game uniforms, home and away uniforms.
Do you know how much additional that would be?
They broke us out. What they spend is $5,500, so it'd be an additional 160 students if you broke that down. I think I divided it by 35. They've got 35 one-color tops and 35 one-color pants. So if we broke it down and divided that by 35, approximately $160 per player that we would have to pay for uniforms.
Then you said, Kelly asked a question about insurance, which you said you'd find out. And I know you mentioned transportation. Is that a cost that can be estimated?
So right now for games, they're spending anywhere between $2,200 and $2,500 to games. We have not costed out what it would cost us to put a driver on to get us down there for practices, on top of splitting the cost of transportation from Coxsackie to contests.
Okay. And when you mentioned, I think it was the cost of officials, is that right? Was that our shared cost, or is that the total cost and we get a piece of it?
That's the total cost. We have to pay a piece of it again based on it. The way it's been working is based on the number of students that we would be sending down.
I mean, we pay a percentage based on the number of
Correct.
students? Okay.
Yeah.
Mike, is it possible to get some sort of information as to how much we spend per team now on the things we have here, like soccer, what uniforms, transportation costs, et cetera, so we can compare?
We can get into the budget for that. That's shouldn't be too difficult. You want it broken out by sport?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to create a ton of work for everybody, but just in my mind, that sounds like a lot, but I have nothing to reference it against in terms of what we spend for other teams.
And as part of that, if you're going to list out how much, for example, we're spending on uniforms for the other teams, if you could confirm that like our current teams do have their own uniforms. Are uniforms provided, or are students responsible for getting part of that themselves? I don't know, Tracy. That's why I'm asking. I mean, I'm not sure that it hasn't been clear to me in the past. That's true.
Any other thoughts or comments? And you were saying February is when
We would have to contact section 2.
to me, it kind of falls into what are the priorities, and we wouldn't have necessarily priorities for the budget, so it's a little difficult to kind of go through, make a decision, and then find out that because of that decision that we need to eliminate 3 different things that are a higher priority. So that's kind of what I'm struggling with.
Mike, when you do get more information, and like, it seems like at some point we're gonna have another discussion. Whenever we do have that discussion, could you put all this in, like just compile it in a sheet for us to see? I think it'll be easier to follow what the costs are for it if we can see it in print.
Sure. Yes.
I stepped out for a second, I hope I didn't miss this, but have we polled students to see how many are actually interested in the program?
We have polled in the past. We have not polled currently this year. I think one of the things that we worry a little bit about is, the accuracy of some of those polls when we start to put those things out there. Students are sitting around the lunch table and asking their friends if they're going to do it, and then to who actually shows up. Those numbers tend to change, but we would definitely want to get an interest survey out there.
The other thing is just for practices, in order to get down to Coxsackie Athens, then are students going to be missing ninth period? Like how, is there enough time to even transport students there?
That would be something that we would have to work out with Coxsackie Athens in regards to when practices are being run and those types of things. Yeah, I would not be in favor of anybody being dismissed early on a regular basis out of academic classes to get down to a practice every day.
All right, thank you, Mike. Then I'm going to move this on to Kelly, who's going to talk about the coffee and chat.
So I'd like to get a second one. We had our first one. I'd like to get another one on the schedule. I'm looking at Saturday, January 6th. I think that's the right date. I don't know.
Yes, it is. That
Thank
would be
you. Saturday, January 6th. I'm thinking like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. So basically, I'm looking for 2 volunteers willing to give up that morning to meet with people.
I'm willing to, pending verification that I don't have something that day.
All right, I'll check in with you.
Same.
All right.
That's
Jay and then Eric.
I can get the next one.
Well, either
Could
that
we
or
have 3?
we can have 3. So the thing is, I can step out and the 3 of you can do it. But we thought it might be better if there was at least one of us who'd done it before, a little continuity. So we can work it out from there with the 3 of you. And the location is pending. One of my goals with this was to have us in different areas of the district. So I've reached out to a couple different places to figure out where we're going to go next.
All right, Harrison, is there anything you'd like to share with us about the student body update?
At this time, I do not. However, I would just like to just mention, just give a nice shout out to, to the district-wide transportation staff and Ms. Judicus, transportation supervisor, for all the great work they did in getting all us kids here safely today with the, the weather conditions this morning, and I'm sure this afternoon as well. So they continue to do a great job with transporting all us. So I just wanted to just give that shout out to them.
Thank you for sharing that. Kelly?
I'm going to piggyback off that. I sent an email this afternoon as I sat in the pickup line at Ellis, and I watched those poor people running back and forth with a smile on their face, soaked to the bone. So kudos to the aides and the building and grounds crew who stand outside no matter the weather and direct the kids and keep them safe, and did it with a smile on their face.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, now let's move us on to action items. I need a motion to approve the minutes from the board meeting of November 13th.
Angela, Jay?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Need a motion to accept the finance reports for the month ending November 30th.
Kelly and Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations.
Angela? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Kelly and Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to approve the real property tax adjustment for 23-24.
Jay? Eric?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, so moving us on to topics for discussion at a future meeting. Does anyone have input items for future meetings?
We already covered one.
There we go, exactly. All right, and then just a couple of quick reminders. January 8th is our next business meeting, which will be a budget meeting with the rollover budget that Todd discussed earlier. And then everyone should have received their packet with the additional dates, so please add those budget dates to your calendar. All right, so the closing open forum. Please note that the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that would like to share a comment or say anything? Do we have any emails? Okay. Then I could have a motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss personal matters concerning the employment of a particular person. Any discussion?
This is not for discussion at all, but as we're getting to the end of our meeting here, I just wanted to wish everyone on the Board of Education, the members of the Greenville administration, and members of the community here and watching at home a very happy holiday and a very happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very nice. All right, so we got the motion, all in favor? Thank you, everyone.